listening to the podcast. For those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop your comments down below, share if you can. For those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, or any of the other podcasting platforms, please follow, give us a 5-star review as well. All of that stuff helps with the algorithms and gets us in front of more eyeballs and hopefully grows the podcast. So all of it is much appreciated. All right, let's go on to the big game then of the weekend. Tottenham versus Arsenal. Is this just the big Sunday kickoff, I think, isn't it? I think it's like the 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. Sunday kickoff or something like that. All the build-up. This year it's at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium first. I don't know why. It feels like it's always the other way around normally, right? It always like kind of first.
It pretty much always is. Yeah, it pretty much always is at the Emirates first.
Yeah, but it's flipped this year, so you're gonna go away. And yeah, boy, the timing of this is not. I would say the Man United Liverpool game probably wasn't great timing for us, but I feel like this one's probably not great timing for you guys as well. Injuries galore, suspensions, quite a lot of things going on, and I guess the only saving grace is Tottenham are coming into this game off the back of a defeat and a draw themselves, so they're not exactly like absolutely pulling up trees. But yeah, I guess the immediate situations for us to chat about is, who do you think is going to fill the DM or kind of 8 slot that Declan Rice has been occupying? And then who do you think is going to fill in the number 10 role, with Odegaard looking like he's now out for 3 weeks to a month after that injury on international duty? Because that's 2/3 of your midfield gone. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think you're going to move players out of position, or do you just think some of the youngsters are going to come in? How do you think Arteta is going to approach this game?
So I really don't know. I've kind of gone around in my head and kind of thought, what do I think will happen? And obviously we've got Jorginho and Partey, and I think they're probably the two most natural players to play in those kind of 8 roles, right? So from that point of view, I'd expect the two of them to start in those roles. But the issue is, now that we've got no Vieira, it's the cam role, the 10, that I'm more worried about in terms of who's going to replace Odegaard. I've seen some stuff about Arsenal fans talking about how Saka can play in the 10 and all this other stuff, but I just don't think that is a likely thing that we're going to try and do during a game like this, against Tottenham. So I'm kind of thinking, is he going to try and throw in somebody from the one of the youngsters, like a Nwaneri or someone similar? And I just can't see that happening either. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe he starts with maybe like a Zinchenko next to a Partey, and then sticks Jorginho into a 10, which I know Jorginho really doesn't suit. But I think in terms of creativity, maybe Jorginho probably offers the most out of the attacking midfield options that we've got right now, like in terms of people that are real attackers. So, I mean, if we had other people fit, I would say we'd probably start somebody else. But I could, the only other thing I can think of maybe is that he tries to stick Havertz in a 10 and then try and play maybe Trossard ahead of him. But to me, that's totally fine. But to go from Odegaard to Havertz, creativity wise, is mental. I don't see how that would work unless we're just going to start overloading the flanks and we're just going to basically not play through the middle at all, right? Just have, let's say, Jorginho and Partey spraying it out wide to Saka and maybe to Martinelli or Sterling, even, depending on who starts. And then just have them playing balls into the box or in behind, or low balls into the box for Trossard or Havertz to try to get onto. But I don't know, man. I'm honestly a bit worried, and just looking through our squad, it really looks like we are super light on players right now. And I've been having this thought. I don't know if we want to get into it too much, but I've been having this thought recently of we've had 2 years now of really trying to push the juggernaut of Man City to the absolute brink every single time. And we've been relatively lucky in terms of injuries, right? The only players that have got injured have been the ones that usually always get injured anyway, right? Like the Gabby Jesuses of the world. But our key players haven't really had any injuries. And it kind of almost feels like this might be a bit of a down year where we maybe end up coming second or third. We suffer some injuries. We, have to deal with some stuff here and there. And we come out next season, in the transfer window and go and buy a bunch of players that we need to revitalise the squad. Because it almost feels like, getting rid of Vieira, getting rid of Nelson, getting rid of Nketiah. Those are all players that I wanted to get rid of, but I was expecting that we would replace them with somebody, like for like, if not better, in every single one of those positions. And the issue that we've got right now is that we just haven't done that. And I think that will hurt us. We've got a really difficult run of fixtures coming up now, and we're going to have it looks like Marino's out until mid-October. Obviously, as you said, Odegaard's going to be out for the next 3 weeks now. Calafiori's bloody doubtful. We've got some serious issues, because if we go down, if we don't have Odegaard available, I think people don't realise just how much of our style and play depends on him. And as much as I don't think Fabio Vieira was really good for us, generally speaking, I do think that he had a lot of characteristics that you could say were relatively similar to Odegaard, right? Left-footed, quick, kind of lightweight, a bit cheeky here with like little dinky passes left and right. He probably wasn't as, I guess, composed and as good a playmaker as Odegaard, but at least you can kind of see, all right, maybe he'll do like a poor man's Odegaard in that role in the meantime while Odegaard's injured. But now, we're going to put Marino in there? Who we're going to put Havertz? Who's going to play in that role if Odegaard's out for 6 months? There's no one. Like, unless we're going to really entrust put all of our trust into the youngsters, we're screwed, and we're going to have to find another way to play, because Odegaard is so central to everything that we do. Almost too central. I've seen some tacticos on Twitter that kind of diss how reliant we are on Martin Odegaard, but it's obviously been working, being so reliant. But without him, I just don't see what happens. So, yeah, I know that your question was who do you think is going to replace it, but I just have to get that out there, because I'm really starting to see some signs that this might not be our year, man. We might not be able to do it. Try and push City 3 times in a row.
Yeah, I think the way things have been laid out this season in terms of your fixtures, and then now these injuries and little suspensions and things like that are really going to make it hard for you guys. And the only thing you had in your control, because those things aren't really in your control, is making sure your squad is robust enough to deal with situations like this. And I guess that's the one criticism you can level at Arteta and Edu over this summer transfer window. Did they do enough to prepare the team for this type of scenario? Because you're right, you have been quite fortunate with injuries. Obviously, 2 seasons ago with your first title charge, you got quite unlucky at the end because Saliba went out, Tomiyasu went out, and you were left with Rob Holding. But even for the rest of that season, you were quite lucky. Like, you had your starting 11 for the most of that season to get you into that position. Last season, you didn't have many injuries at all. I mean, again, it was like you said, it was the injuries to the same people all the time. Tomiyasu, Jesus, Partey, the ones that you expect to probably get injured. And the rest of your squad was pretty healthy. And then this season, it's sod's law, isn't it? Like, your most critical player, the player that you play through the most and is, the fulcrum of your style and your team, gets injured. I think he was injured in the last game too, wasn't he? He kind of got a knock against Brighton, and then he went off to Norway. And I mean, that's probably a little bit of an issue as well. Maybe you needed to try and pull him out of that squad if you could. I know it's easier said than done, but there's all these things where I just feel like little small decisions might be going the wrong way at this early stage, and it might just make this season a tough one to stay up there and compete and try and win the league with City again, because they bloody came out of the traps, fight all guns blazing. Haaland looks like he's been in the cryogenic chamber the whole summer, just waiting for these moments. It looks like it's going to be hard. And the only criticism, and I get it, because I've been watching some Arsenal content creators, and I think Turkish makes a really good point about this. And obviously he does it with his usual kind of hilarious anger. But you're short, man. And you could see it coming throughout the whole summer with the deals you were doing. You were selling players, which is good. I think all your fans were happy about the players that you let go. But it was like you just said, there weren't the replacements coming in. And I know people will say, oh, yeah, you got Sterling, you got Marino, you got Calafiori. But let's be honest, you didn't really sell a defender, did you? So you got one more player in a position you were stacked. You got one player in midfield, and you didn't really sell anyone in midfield, and then in your attacking midfield to front line, you sold 3 or 4
Yeah.
players, and you got one in. So
Yeah, we lost out in the attacking section. That's where we are short. I don't think we're short in the centre of midfield or in defence. I think, adding a defender in basically just tells me that Zinchenko is going to be more of a centre mid than he is a left back this year, right? And even Jurriën Timber can play in the defensive mid position.
in DM,
So
yeah,
I'm not worried at all about goalkeeper, defence, and even like the kind of central midfield, the 2 8s. I'm not really worried about that, but I am worried about our attacking threat because we relied so heavily on people like Odegaard and Saka last year, and then adding Trossard into the mix as well. And the year before that, we relied on Martinelli, Saka, and Odegaard basically, right? We've never really been able to rely on a striker, and we've relied on those 3 people. Now, if we lose, one of those 3, and arguably probably the most critical of the 3, just based off his position, we're gonna have to rely on who? Who we're gonna rely on Saka again? If he goes down, God forbid, like God save us, we're screwed. If Trossard somehow just decides I'm not going to be the most clutch substitute you've ever seen in your life, then we're screwed again. And then Odegaard being out for 3 weeks, he did come from an injury-prone background, right? It's not crazy for him to be injured. If he goes and we've got absolutely no one creative to replace him, then again, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be relying on Havertz, who, I'll be honest with you, we made him look better last season because we fed him, right? We gave him the right opportunities. We gave him the right crosses, the right, back post, late runs, all of this kind of stuff that made him look really good. If you put the ball on the floor in front of his feet, he's not going to look the same. I'm sorry to say, he's not going to look the same. When you play him up top and he's bullying defenders and, getting headers and this, that, and the other, he looks good because that suits his game. When you put the ball on the ground and he starts doing his language style when he's, you're relying on him to be creative, we're not going to be so happy with the whole Havertz move. So I just think, it's naive is what we've been. And I think we had plenty of opportunities based off of, what was happening in the transfer window to do something about it. And I just don't think we moved quickly enough. I don't think we moved with any urgency or, real, vim to try and go and get somebody. I feel like the Sterling deal is just like right place, right time, right numbers. We just ended up grabbing him. But we weren't planning on doing that, right? It was all the whole Chelsea debacle and Maresca coming out and saying, you ain't playing anymore. Give me your bloody shirt number. Get out of here. You're not playing. The only reason that we ended up getting him is because of that and because Chelsea were desperate to get some of his wages off the books. So we could have ended up without him either. So that to me just shows like planning wise, Edu, what are you doing, mate? Unless we're in some dire FFP position where we need to sell everybody, I don't understand why we've gone and done this. And this is kind of why I see it as like it's possibly a down year. It almost seems Pep-like, where it's like, I know this season I'm going to be off the boil a bit. I'm going to try and get through it. And they're just so good that they managed to get through it and they managed to win things even despite having down years, right? Think of how many down years City have had in the last 4 or 5 years. It's been a couple where we've said, oh, they don't look as good as they used to. Oh, they're not playing with a striker this year. Oh, De Bruyne is injured all the time. They have their down years and they still go and win the league. We're going to have a down year, but we just ain't going to be able to win the league. And I hope it's just because we're recharging so that next summer we go out and get someone, crazy, like a Nico Williams or whatever else. And I know you tell me I'm dreaming or whatever, but that's what we're going to need to get back into a fighting position, I think, personally. Unless we're just waiting or hoping that Pep Guardiola leaves at the end of the season, which is possible, but that would be a really cowardly way to try and win something. I'd much rather win it while he's here. So it's a sad situation, but I could. It's the puzzle pieces are starting to kind of drop now, and it almost seems like it might be intentional. Like we know we're not going to be able to get people. There's the right people aren't on the market right now. So we're just going to try and go into the season with a slightly lighter squad and do our best, expecting things not to be quite as good, and then we'll come back next year. But if that is the case, it's a sad one for Arsenal fans because it's going to be a bit of an emotional roller coaster. I can imagine.
Yeah, I think it's. I've seen people talk about it, and I get the logic being like he's gone from a squad of 22 players, and he could only trust like 12 or 13 of them, to a squad of 20 players, but he can trust 16 or 17 of them. That's the logic some people are using. But the issue you have is, luck is everyone, fate and luck applies to everyone in a pretty similar way. And you've been quite lucky with the injuries and the suspensions and certain other situations in the last couple of years. You don't keep evading that. Like, it's going to come round and hit you at some point. And so maybe it just looks like the strategy hasn't lined up with what seems like already a bit more trouble around suspensions and injuries, even at this early stage. So let's see, man. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be a masterstroke because he's seen and weary and some other youngsters in training, and he thinks they've got, Kobe Mainu vibes about them, and they're going to break through into the squad. Who knows, man? You never really know. You got to give them a chance to come in, and I do think there's a possibility that Nwiri comes in, but I do think it's probably unlikely. I think my opinion on who will replace Rice and Odegaard is most likely that he's going to drop Jorginho in there next to Partey, play a double pivot, put Havertz in the 10, and play Trossard in up top as a false 9 running off him. And that will probably be what you do. I think, that will probably be the safest option really away at Spurs. Because we'll talk about it in a minute, but some people are acting like Spurs are absolute dog and saying that you can still go win there easily without, 2 of your best players. Don't get me wrong, you could win there, but I don't think it'll be easy. With your best players, it's still kind of nip and tuck, but without a couple of your really top players, I think it's going to be a bigger fight than some Arsenal fans are willing to concede. So yeah, let's see how it goes. Last question on this before we get into predictions. You've obviously got a very difficult run. You've got this game. You've got Atalanta away in the Champions League. We don't need to ask anyone more than Liverpool about how tough that can be. And then you've got Man City away after that. Bloody hell. That Premier League supercomputer absolutely bent you guys over, didn't it? If you drop points in this game, because I'll be honest, no offense to Spurs, this is one of the easier ones in that run. They're all difficult, but it's definitely easier than City away, right? Let's be real.
Yeah.
If you drop points in this game, what do you think? Are you still going to feel like it's too early to concede anything in the title race? Or do you think it's, you seem pretty down just then. Do you think it will be curtains on the wall, as Saeed says?
I don't think it's curtains on the wall, but I just think it puts you in a position behind Man City and you've got to try and catch them up. And I think the only way you beat them is if you just do what Liverpool did and you just go on a crazy run and you just don't let them ever come near you, right? Like, and that's what we've seen in the last 2 seasons. It's the only way you can really do it, right? Like, you might get lucky, they might slip up here and there and get a draw and drop a couple of points, but it's not going to happen frequently, right? You can pick 20 games and you can imagine that they maybe drop points in 1. So if we keep dropping points at the beginning of the season, that's totally fine. It just means that we're going to have to be literally impeccable from now until the end of the season. We're going to have to beat them, probably home and away, and then beat all of the other top 4 teams around them as well. Because don't get me wrong, I'm not a major fan of Liverpool, but they're looking good, and I do think that people are writing them off a bit too early this season. I definitely think they could go on and maybe be the challenge to Man City's title this season if Arsenal don't buck up. So I don't think it's curtains on the wall, as Saeed would say, but I do think it's the probability of winning the league just goes down, right? And in other times before Man City, before this whole juggernaut, it wouldn't be as big a deal this early in the season. I just think now with Man City, it's a much bigger deal, and I think it does drop your chances quite significantly every time you drop points earlier on in the season, because like I said, they just don't drop points at the end of the season. They're just going to come through. Rodri's going to turn into a bloody droid again and just start winning everything.
He hasn't even played yet.
Exactly. That's what I mean. We're talking about depth. They haven't had their best player that's arguably one of the top 3 candidates, top 4 candidates for Ballon d'Or this year. They haven't even had him. And they're still murking everyone. And it's an absolute joke what they're doing to teams right now. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough one, man. They've literally just lost one of their, better players for 80 million to Atletico, and they look like that nothing happened. They don't care. It means nothing.
Yeah, I agree, man. I don't know if the Tottenham game is a nail in the coffin, but I do think if you come out of this run without many points, it might be sayonara for the title race already, because fighting with City is all good and well. I'm not saying you couldn't come second. I'm not saying you couldn't end up, being quite close to them in the end. But I mean, just to win the title and be in a legitimate title race. Because if you lose this game or you draw and City win, you're 4 or 5 points behind them already. And then you obviously playing them away. If you lose that, you're 7 on top, or 8 points behind them already. That's too much, bro. After like 5 or 6 games, it's too much. If you're a couple of points behind and you're nip and tuck with them, I don't think City are like completely unbeatable. But I think if you go 7 or 8 points behind after 5 or 6 game weeks, and you've still got to go to Anfield, you've still got to go to a couple of other, big grounds, and you might drop more points. I don't think it's doable. So I think, the Tottenham one would be. I've seen some Arsenal fans out there saying if we drop points at Tottenham, it's done. I don't think that's realistic. But if you drop points in both games, big trouble. And I think you need to. I think the one thing that you said, which I agree with, is even if it's a down season, to maintain where you guys are looking to go, that's all fine, right? I don't think fans should lose their head if you do have a bit of a, you stay in second, but you're a bit further behind, or you drop to third and you're quite a bit behind compared to the last 2 seasons. You're still in there. You got to stay comfortably in Champions League. You got to show that you're still a good team. And I think you guys are a good enough team that I don't think that's not going to happen. But I just think you can't let yourself get pulled into the dunya where, like, Tottenham, Man U, Chelsea, Newcastle, Villa. You don't want to be dragged into that madness. I can speak from experience. You want to stay up there where you are, even if you can't convert it into a title-winning season this season. So I think that's got to be your bottom line. You got to just make sure you stay consistently above the scragglers. All right, let's get into the prediction then, Johns. What do you think? How do you think it will go, and what do you think the score will be?
I'm going to go for a 4-2 Arsenal win. I think these are high scoring games. I mean, the last fixture was 3-2, right? We won. We went 3 up, and then they somehow clawed a couple goals back. I think it will be, again, another high scoring game. I don't think it's hard to predict, and I don't think it's easy to predict either. I think it's like flip a coin, whatever, because I think it will be a madness game, and everyone will just high line for life, mate. And then Arsenal doing what Arsenal do. Gabriel does something, Saliba does something, Raya does something. Who knows? There's mistakes to be made in this game on both sides. So I see a high scoring game.
Yeah, I agree, man. I don't think this might be the prediction curse, but I think there's absolutely 0% chance on like a low scoring 0-0 or 1-0 or something like that. I think the way the way the cards have been dealt with your injuries and everything like that, I don't think you can just sit in and try and hope for a dogged defensive display. I don't think it's completely impossible that he tries to do that, because think of City last year. You did that, and I know there was criticism, but I thought it was a top decision. But I think Spurs don't allow you to do that. They're too gung-ho. They're at home as well. The stadium's going to be rocking. I think there's absolutely 0 chance it's a low-scoring game. So I agree with you. I think it's going to be pretty basketballish. But yeah, I think if you had a full team, I think 4-2, totally reasonable. I think with this current team, I'm not quite there to say Arsenal are gonna win that convincingly. And actually, the more I think about it, I think Tottenham are going to want to bounce back. So I'm going to go for a 2-2, which I don't think will be the worst result in the world for you guys, considering, the injuries and kind of some of the turmoil you're going through. But yeah, I think it's going to be 2-2. A quick scoreboard update. I'm doing this reluctantly because I'm getting absolutely walloped. I've got 3 points still. I got nothing right on the last prediction. So no advancement for me on that side. You got 1 result right. You got the Liverpool beating Man United result. You were close to getting the exact score as well. If it wasn't for Salah scoring the 3rd, you would have got it. So you've got 1 point, and then I think we both got the Arsenal-Brighton result wrong. We both predicted Arsenal home wins. and it was a draw. So
Thank
you're
you,
winning.
Chris Kavanagh. Good job, mate.
Exactly. Fans still salty about that. So the scoreboard right now is 11-3. So yes.